Bryan, the hodgepodge of people who supported Bryan against the forces of, well, it says national honor. And this talks about the Republican Party goes there. So it's obviously an anti-Bryan party. And showing this motley crew of farmers and free soilers, and they try to imply that they're kind of archaic and old. And something else here, suffragettes. And so it's mocking that the fact that the populists supported women's right to vote. And so all that is in there, and then various things about socialism and you name it. Well, when the election actually happened, these states that the populists thought they had very close elections, and they all went to McKinley. And so even though the popular vote was pretty close, the electoral vote went to McKinley. Now, it's one of these things where the election was not like a razor-thin election, but this election would be part of the massive change. And you saw it in 1860. This will be a change. We literally change everything. 1932, 48 will be like that. 68 will be like that. Arguably 80. I don't know where we're at now. You know, it's hard to see what we're at right now because we need a little bit of time to look back at it. And don't forget, presidential elections are not national elections. Oh, sure, they count the votes. But every state has their own little election within the state. This is how they do it. State assemblies decided to let the people vote, and whoever wins each state gets all their what? Electors. Now, a couple of these states, like here, one elector was supposed to vote for McKinley, and he voted for Bryan. But it's still a gray area about that. So don't forget, presidential elections, even people might be thinking nationally, it's just not the way they function in the United States. Okay, so this election, it's really did change the entire way politics are going to be done. It was the first campaign, and I forgot to write this down. So first campaign, they campaigned for themselves. From now on, you're going to get people like presidential candidates go out and campaign for themselves all the time. Give speeches, shake hands, meet people. That didn't happen until 1896. Oh, sure, they might give a speech, but that's it. Now the campaigning is we think. Now that's going to dramatically change in the 50s because of television, and because it's so operating with a screen, we just get different derivatives of that now. But the other big changes would be this: it's urban. Urban interests began to dominate. It's not that they weren't important before, but when I mean urban, I mean big money. Money interests dominate. Banking, finance, but also industry. And they still dominate to this day, even though we have a massive rural and urban divide just as then, maybe even more so now. It is because the voting is just so. Just if you live in a city or outside the city, you can almost just tell who they're going to vote for. So it's kind of shocking now. Next, money is going to become more important than ever before. For the first time in presidential elections, whoever has the most money has a clear advantage. Because the money will get your voice out there. So William Jennings Bryan rose a lot of money in this election. People thought, unprecedented amount. Bryan got $700,000 for his campaign. And that was seen as just an outrageously high amount. John D. Rockefeller, what's Rockefeller's company again? He alone gave the McKinley campaign $700,000. Alone he did that. McKinley had over 7 million. And that's what's important. The moneyed interest. And the thing is, the moneyed interest saw Bryan as a real threat. And they dumped money into this campaign. He's a real threat to them. Now you can imagine, well, what are you going to do? Eventually you're going to get both parties who try to appeal to the same money. And that's coming down the road. And this also relates to the pendulum now. Before, people used to campaign for president thinking they'll get a cushy job. Well, now that avenue of getting people to campaign for you is over. So what did politicians begin to do more and more today, all the time? Raise money. And then lastly, even though Bryan lost, it was clear that a significant number of people want some kind of reform, maybe not the rural-based reform, but this will directly lead to the progressive movement. And then the New Deal. And then the Great Society under President Lyndon Johnson, well, John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. Kind of the last presidents of that kind of populist, progressive, liberal wave in American history. And we'll see this. Now, you can argue whether or not this is good policy or not. But the point is, it was like, oh, we got to do something. There's got to be something. And more, this idea will be called liberal because of FDR. I mean, of economically. So with that, one more thing. I wonder what book is going to be written as a parable of the populist movement. It could be anything. What is that a screenshot from? Dumb and Dumber. Yeah. And so the thing is, first movie I could think of. Yeah, The Wizard of Oz is a parable of the populist movement. And so the movie, which actually wasn't that popular when it came out, which is so weird because it's actually a really good movie. Who's seen The Wizard of Oz? If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It's a good movie. But it's about populism. I'll give you one example. Okay, what kind of shoes does she wear? Does Dorothy wear?
Silver.
In the book, it's silver for free silver. Farmers, workers, politicians who need the courage to go out to support them. Yeah, there's all kinds. It's actually pretty interesting. So I will do like maybe the week before the Vigilante Parade week, that kind of weird week. You guys won't be weird week. You got the AP exam, but I'm going to do the Wizard of Oz in special topics. We'll talk about populism, and then I'll have to show off what relates to populism. Kind of a fun little unit right now. I would highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's good. And yes, I have a fear of tornadoes for lots of reasons. Partially because of this movie, and flying monkeys are bothersome. Moving on. So this was in the newspaper. Actually, this was in the early 1990s as an advertisement. I thought this was so funny, I had to put this up. If you don't know The Wizard of Oz, this one makes no sense. If you do know it, it's hilarious and true. To kill again. Okay, so new heading, imperialism. Imperialism. We've talked about imperialism before. And what is imperialism? We need a definition. By the way, behind it, see that scene? That's the Battle of Manila Bay. What is imperialism? It is, of course, empire. Empire for profit. Empire for profit. For profit. Now, the profit could be prestige, it could be money, it could be political profit, but it's some kind of profit. And the United States, won its independence from an imperial power. The United States kind of became an imperial power because they conquered, kicked this area, kicked the survivors out, and took the land. But unlike other imperial powers, they made this part of the United States. And by 1853, the continental United States, the U.S. had claimed and taken that land. But that's 1853. So, for profit. A couple things about this. First off, after 1853, the United States began to expand outside of those borders. A couple islands, but the first really big one, let's get to mercantilism. I forgot, I had to jump the gun. Just to review, remember mercantilism? Mercantilism is that colonial policy to suck all the wealth out. Suck the wealth out of colonies. Suck the wealth out of your empire. Why? To maximize exports. Get raw materials and make sure you're always selling. And make sure the colonies are only buying from you. So suck the wealth out. And then most imperial powers suck the wealth out and then leave ruin. And by the way, extraction areas, where you get a lot of raw materials, even within countries, operate like colonies. Like example which I gave you before, beef. Suck the wealth out, leave. So there are two basic types: colonial imperialism, where you basically set your flag down and put, this is in our borders. You colonize it, and the United States and Australia, or the Americas and Australia, because of disease, this allowed for settler colonization, where they literally come in and kick the survivors out. Most places could not do that as much because the people fought back. But here is an example of British colonization in Burma. And I think that's a very appropriate picture. You see what's happening there? It's her with the pith helmet, clearly British. And that's in Burma, which was a British colony. And this, you see, these are Hottentots. And they are the Hurai tribe it is Namibia now, but then it was German Southwest Africa. That was a German colony. And basically, they were being enslaved. Even they didn't call them slaves. You see the chains around their neck? Suck the wealth out. If you don't know where Namibia is, yeah. Right. It doesn't look that big because of the way the map is, but it's a massive place. And economic imperialism, we've talked about this before too. With like the fur trade, literally come in, even though these areas would still be technically independent, you make sure that the government's friendly to allow the colonial or the empire to come in with their businesses and take over the economy, take over the minerals, take over mining, take over fishing. And this is a Cuban political cartoon from the turn of the last century about what happened with the United States after the Spanish-American War. And they have Uncle Sam with tentacles and basically coming in and taking Central America, with Cuba making it part of the American empire, economic empire. So this was the Cuban point of view. I thought I was kind of glad I found that one. So Seward's Folly in 1867 was the first big attempt at getting land. It just won $15 million. The United States bought but kind of controversially, we made this part of the United States. Equal parts, yes. That's Alaska. And I love this in 1867. First off, this was called Russian America. And there's William Seward was Secretary of State for both Lincoln and Andrew Johnson. So Johnson was president. And they have it as a chunk of ice, and we got swindled. Thus, the Seward's Folly. The other thing is, and it's kind of hard to see, look at the map on the right. They have no idea. They were just starting to explore. So here's Alaska. Kind of looks vaguely like a snout, doesn't it? That's a map for 40 years later. And we bought it basically to make sure the British didn't get it. But the biggest reason was that Russia was the only major power in Europe that supported the United States in the Civil War. And Russia didn't want it anymore, so it's like, okay, since you supported us, we'll take it off your hands. Which is kind of amazing because the US was a republic and Russia had an autocratic monarchy, the Tsar. But Russia supported the US, partially because they were kind of a rivalry with Britain. Now, not many citizens of the United States lived here. No one really understands the scope, at least understood then how big Alaska was. How big is Alaska? In land size, how much of the continent of the United States would Alaska be? A third. A third of the land mass of the continent of the United States is Alaska. Yeah. It's twice as big as Texas. It is kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? But in 1898, gold was discovered. It's called the Klondike Gold Rush. And with gold being discovered there, this is the first time you get large numbers of people in the United States moving in. Population of Alaska is still very small, but it's bigger in Wyoming. A great story about the gold rush. Those were carrying supplies over Salahanook Pass. I mispronounce that all the time. But there'd be two really big gold discoveries in the world that would help keep the world out of the panic. More gold increases the money supply, a little bit of inflation. Anybody know what the other massive gold strike would be in the 1890s? Huge. It's still one of maybe the biggest gold strike ever. South Africa. That's part of the reason why Britain would fight a war called the Boer War, to get that colony. A horrible war. So just a couple more things in. So Washington, though, remember the farewell address? I don't know why I did this like a creamsicle, but I thought it was funny. Washington warned about wars and foreign wars and alliances. Because to his point of view, back in 1797, when he made the first farewell address, he's looking at what Britain and France and all these colonial wars and said, avoid them. We got our own empire to get here. That's what he cared about. So he didn't want imperial wars. And for the most part, the United States avoided this. But by the 1890s, this is going to be ignored, isn't it? See you tomorrow. Because we're now a powerful country, and we're now on the world stage. So let's get to the reasons for empire. Oh, don't write that yet. I'm getting there. So this is a cartoon showing the growing American empire. This is now 1900. And now the America has changed. Here's the capital. Uncle Sam and Lady Columbia, both being used pretty commonly. She would, by 1920, no more reference. And here it's supposed to be an American worker, businessman, and farmer. But you'll notice other things in here too. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines. All now part of a growing American empire. All have little children under the parentage of Uncle Sam and Lady Columbia. And then this strange half-naked baby in front. Now I know what you're thinking. It does have a top hat, so it's okay. I, for a very long time, trying to figure out the eeriness of this, and I'm pretty sure I know what it is now. Have you ever seen when they do like a New Year's Eve thing, and they'll show the old year going off as like an old man, and the new year as a baby? This is for the new century. That's what I'm pretty sure it is. But I don't know what this is. What is that? Is that a pen? Is that a spear? And we'll come back to this. Look at the faces. I wonder if that's going to mean something. So, closing the frontier. By 1890, after the horrific massacre at Wounded Knee, the United States had totally conquered the West. And the U.S. has been focused on the West. And the idea was we have all this energy and want to expand westward. We're not going to want to stop. And so there's this energy to keep going, to get more. Where are you going to go? West. Next, the Panic of 1893. Pullman strike and Coxey's army looked like revolution. And the thought was, we're going to have to unify the country. Don't forget, 30 years earlier was a civil war. That's the Pullman strike. And the thought was, we have this disparate country, the legacy of the Civil War, seeming like revolution. We need to bring people together. And the thought was, a good war will do that. I know that's, to some of you that might sound scary. To some of you, yeah, that makes sense. We'll see. But there's something else that allows us also to trade off our surplus. Remember the boom-bust cycle? What's the first thing? Overproduction. If you get an empire, you force them to buy your overproduced goods. And here shows American trade and imports and exports going up in this era. And here, it's the idea of now we can get all American industry protected by the tariff and keep others out. On that happy note, more empire. Tomorrow, do you want to fight a war tomorrow? What war would be tomorrow? Remember the Maine and the hell with Spain. The Spanish-American War is going on. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. I'll try to get, hopefully I'll have a test grade. If not, okay, next time please walk it over. If you would have impaled somebody. All right, we'll see you. Thank you. And so when you're doing the quiz, you gotta do that quiz, and then you do that. Yep. Or the quiz and the quiz. Yeah. You have to read anything tomorrow. There'll be a quiz tomorrow. I did a sensible read, but I'm not gonna have a quiz. We just have a quiz. Yeah, like, you want another quiz? All right, well, we'll do it. Well, see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Don't forget to write when you find work. Hang by your thumb. It's quiz day. Let's do a quiz. Quiz, 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 quiz. Yes, it's got to be in pen. Got to get used to it. I know, it's easy to make mistakes. You need a pen. Pen. And a pin. Pin and a pen. Let's go. Wednesday.
Wait, what's the thing that Carnegie wrote out?
Oh, sorry about voting you out. Sorry about voting you out. That was really funny. It was really funny. It was super funny. Everyone saw that and was like, yeah, Catherine, that's like,
No, oh my
even though that's how you normally act, you're
Yes!
like, yeah, what I
Did you guys actually think I was it, or that was like, oh, we caught it?
No, I didn't.
I was the first to vote out, and this one was like, Travis or Ginger. I was like,
You know, he
Yeah,
told me
he
when
went to
I
Isabel.
because we have 3 gingers in our class, and he was like, I'm surprised y'all lasted this long. Usually y'all get voted out first. That was
the gospel of wealth. Okay.
Dude, if I had accused you at the end, I feel like I would have been sad.
I do think so too. Campbell is Gilliger, and I got Campbell in.
I sold
Dude,
the bed.
I was accusing, I made no sense. It was like Spanish all over them, man.
I was just
No, it
chilling.
definitely was. We were just voting people out.
Yeah, honestly, I
We were
was
like, oh yeah, I said Emma, yeah,
like, she's been quiet. And then
You need a sheet of paper. You need a pen.
we actually.
Yes, pen. And a pen. Just one pen.
Is it 20?
One pen.
Can it be red?
No, only blue or black.
We don't have a blue red.
Why don't you have a blue or black pen?
Because if we were
We don't like red pen. No red pen. For the AP exam, but also red pen is a little bit harder to read, especially after grading a lot.
This was just really long because I explained it like.
Yeah, anyone loan you a pen?
But this was like.
On the edge, as far over, I don't want to do white space. I don't want to see white space. 1 to 12. I want it, I'm doing this. As far over as you can get it here. 1 to 12. If I see white space, on anybody's paper, you lose 10 points.
Or did you?
Because you're the only one accountable.
Didn't you have Phoenix there?
No. Wow. That Phoenix is there. I've always quick.
It has to be blue. This like.
It has to be blue.
But in my social Darwinism, that was the idea, a real fight in politics should be colored people if they're unemployed. And so you see an example of that with like the Pullman Striker Nazis Army and what happened. Did they help the unemployed or did they arrest them for walking on the grass? So that's social Darwinism. So what are you going to do? By the way, who likes social Darwinism?
So you're like, that, yeah, like you just didn't like those.
Yes. Yes.
I have a green pen.
No, blue or black.
You had green.
But I'm glad. Are you just bragging? Cool.
No.
Blue or black?
I have a blue one.
If you need to borrow one, see if someone can loan you one. Yeah.
I have a blue one.
I only see it.
The Populist Party? Well, the thing about the Populist Party, that shows that there's a different idea of what to do about capitalism. So that's going to lead to this concept of growing up liberal economics. Okay, so. Huh? Is it blue or black? I don't want blue or black. Yeah, I don't want red. It's got to be blue or black pen. I do have a couple pins I can loan you, but it's got to be blue or black. I don't want red. I don't want green. I don't want plaid. I want blue or black pen. And on the AP exam, you can only use dark blue or dark black.
As compared to light black.
Huh? Yeah, I guess light black would be white.
Or gray.
That'll work. It should work.
Sharpie.
Bring a pen next time. I'll loan you one, but you have to have a pen. All right, I'll hand the test out. I know it's a pain to write in a pen because you're used to making, make mistakes. You gotta erase it, but you gotta get used to doing it.
It's so much faster to just cross it off and keep it.
I'm not disagreeing, but yeah. But if you make,
It is.
just put one line or two lines. Don't make a big, because that's sponges. If you make a huge mistake where you totally like a whole sentence, cross it out, put a little asterisk, and then write the correction at the end of the sentence or the end of the paragraph. If it's one word, one line through it, write the correction.
Do we need how many pieces of paper?
Just one.
Thank you.
1 to 12 on the sides. We need a pen. Next time, bring a pen. But pen is easy to write with. It really is.
You don't have to start.
I agree. One to 12 on the. As far over as you can go. Yeah, that's fine. You can use it. The big thing about pen is anything involving a sentence. If you want to do the multiple choice of pens, are not stuff. But anything involving a sentence, you gotta get used to it. Would you like a bonus question?
Yes.
What was unusual, in fact, unique about President Cleveland's 2 terms as president? Yeah, put it by your name. What was unique about President Cleveland's 2 terms as president? Does it there, but we got about 20 minutes. Oh, for the boom bust, you do have to write a short ID, but just give me the very basic drawing. Boom. Two things happen in that curve downward. Bust. 2 things happen in the curve up. That's it. And a cap. I want a cap. Here. Watch. I will be grading on artistic ability.